Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Nerd to the Third Power, your one-stop shop for all things nerdy and awesome. I'm your host, Master of Ceremonies, Dr. Gonzo. With me, as always, in this epic quest of nerdiness is our resident anime goddess, the Cat. Cat, how you doing?
I'm doing all right.
All right. All right. Good, good. I have finally been able to pry myself away from my PlayStation 4 for a few minutes. I've been just addicted to the PS4 Spider-Man game. After hearing Mike rave about it last week, I had to pick it up and try it out, and oh my god, best game ever! Alrighty, so we got a really fun show tonight, one that I've really been looking forward to. This week we are discussing a 8-part documentary series that's appeared on Netflix called The Toys That Made Us. We're going to talk about some of the toy properties that were discussed on the show, and also kind of talk about our own favorite toys and toy-related experiences from when we were little, because, you know, toys are something that, you know, not beyond just being, you know, childhood playthings, you know, they're really kind of emblematic of fandom, but we'll get into that as we get into the discussion. But of course, first there is procedure to follow, and we got a bit of a backlog here, so we're going to just jump right into Ask a Geek, and we got some questions here, and Kat, we got one hot off the presses for you. This one is from Lisa, and she asks about your thoughts on the announcement of Netflix making a live-action Last Airbender series.
God, I knew that was going to be the first question we got today. Like, I haven't had time to read the full announcement other than it's live action. The original creators are back in the game, working on it. I am cautiously optimistic. A lot of the Netflix shows that I have seen have been out of this world so good. But it's Avatar: The Last Airbender, and there's so much in the cartoon that is going to be very hard and very expensive to bring to life. So there's that part, but then there's also the fact that Avatar: The Last Airbender is a very long series. It's 3 full seasons with really sweeping character arcs. Really, it's such a good show, and I fear what could happen if it has to get condensed down. Now, a lot of, like, season 1, for example, has a lot of filler in it that you could get rid of and still get a really good feel for the characters. But the further you get into the plot of it, the harder it is to make cuts. So that's kind of where I worry the most. I'm not worried about casting or anything like that, because the creators have already promised that it's one of the things they look forward to the most is not having a really fucked up, awful casting.
My one real big concern, because like you said, Netflix has a pretty good track record as far as their show production goes. But one of the things that I'm really raising my eyebrows at is so much of what made The Last Airbender and a sequel series, The Legend of Korra, what it was stuff that could only really be done really feasibly in animation. You know, it's kind of like you said, it's one of those shows where as time goes on, the sense of scale just gets larger and larger with each season. And it's one of those things that I see being, you know, very difficult to do with a live action series. I mean, you know, Game of Thrones is able to get away with it because it's got HBO's, like, you know, unending Spielbergian budget behind it, but I don't know if Netflix has the same amount of cash to throw at this series. And another thing that made the show what it was is lots of little things. You know, not just, you know, the great characters and the epic story and the writing, but there was a lot of little touches here and there. Stuff like, you know, the foamy mouth guy, or the cabbage cart, or the cabbage cart guy. You know, and these are things that, you know, little touches like that, little nods or little jokes that help to populate the world of the characters. And, you know, I'm kind of wondering, like, if they're going to try and have those little touches in the new series, or if they're going to kind of just narrow the focus onto the main story arc. Because, I mean, some of the most memorable episodes are ones that really didn't advance the story at all, but were, for lack of a better term, filler, like, Tales of Ba Sing Se, which I still hold up Eero segment as the most heartbreaking thing I've ever seen on television ever. Yeah. And that was a filler episode.
Oh, and the show had such a wonderful balance of comedy and also having a really deep, heart-wrenching story to go with it. There was so much that was going on during it. And bearing in mind that Avatar: The Last Airbender was in fact geared at young people, like it was kid-friendly. Is Netflix going to be able to make a kid-friendly, in the spirit of the original, a kid-friendly live-action show that's also going to be fun for the whole family, that can balance out? It can't be too dark. And, when you watch shows like Jessica Jones or something like that, adaptations of comic books, it can get kind of dark. And that was part of what absolutely murdered the original live action film, was that there was nothing fun in it. It tried to be grimdark and very serious, and it took itself very seriously, and that wasn't in the spirit of the original show. But are they going to be able to balance? Are they going to be able to find that spirit again?
Yeah. So, but we'll see. We'll see what happens, and I'm sure that when it does come out, it's going to be mandatory show material.
Oh God! And how long? Like, they're announcing it now, but it sounded like they weren't in production yet. But for the production value that they're going to have to bring in order, there's going to be just absolutely tons of CG.
Oh yeah, they're definitely gonna have to bring their A game on this one. Last Airbender is one of those things where if you slip up, everything just comes down hard. It's
not like Voltron where you can put out like a short season and then let the animators catch up. This isn't gonna be like that. This is gonna be live action. They're gonna have to dump a season at a time. The amount of production that's gonna have to go into it. Here's a problem that we never had with the original show. The actors age. So if they're gonna do as long as a version, I mean, nobody really aged that much in the original cartoon.
Well, I think the time frame of the original cartoon was only, what, 2 years?
Something, yeah, it was like
the only notable time skip that I recall was when Aang got zapped at the end of season 2 by Azula. And he was in a coma for, I think it was like 6 months.
No, not that long. I don't think that long. That seems unusually long. But it was like just over a year. I want to say the whole story takes place because they had to like wait for the solstice or whatever. For
Sozin's Comet.
Sozin's Comet, that's the thing. Yeah. So it was like, it does take place over the course of like over a year's time, but if you're going to spend a year in production to make the first season, and then if you're having multiple seasons, you're going to have to knock out a lot of production very quickly.
And the excuse of a growth spurt only carries you so far when it comes to actors aging.
Right. And it's not like, oh, this is Game of Thrones and Bran is like 3 feet taller now, but we're going to hide it because he's crippled. Like he'll just never stand and you won't notice how tall he got. We're not gonna have that. It's
a version of what I got a buddy who works for a small, he works for a TV studio up in Baltimore. It's what they call the Radar O'Reilly problem, where you have a character who ages to the point where he looks years above what he's cast as, but there's no way to hide it. And it's named from a character in the MASH TV series called Radar O'Reilly, who was played by Gary Berghoff, who he's supposed to be like this 19-year-old kid. But by the time Gary Berghoff left the show, he was 40 and had gone completely bald.
Oh, Jesus.
So that's definitely an issue that the show is going to have to tackle, is the aging of its characters if they decide to do this.
Yeah, but again, optimistic, cautious, but also optimistic because Netflix has put out a lot of really stellar material. If the original creators are the ones helming it, I have a lot more confidence than, say, M. Night Shyamalan that it will be true to the original intent.
Wouldn't it be funny if just as a nice little dig, they cast Shyamalan as a small like extra role in one of the episodes?
Maybe.
And just made him like a total butt monkey.
or somebody who's supposed to be an illusion to him in some way or another. But I mean, like, the biggest hang up, of course, is going to be like the correct casting because of all the controversy surrounding the film. So like that's like the first thing they have to do is absolutely crush this casting.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they are guaranteed to have dissent among the masses.
And that's all we'll say about that. All right. So that's that question, and we probably got time for one more. I didn't expect that one to go as long as it did.
It's important. We really love Avatar.
I open this up by saying, look, we got a backlog of questions here to get through, and then we spend like 10 minutes on one question.
It's important.
All right. And let's see. Well, this next question here, we got another kind of involved one, and this one is for me, and this one comes from Antonio. And he asked what I thought of the recent Nintendo Direct. And I gotta say, there was a lot of stuff there that I was really surprised by. I wasn't really as impressed or really, you know, kind of jazzed up as I was about the last one. Because there was a lot of stuff that went on in this Direct that I was just kind of like, oh, that's cool, but I wasn't really kind of, you know, kind of jumping up for joy with like with the previous one. We're getting Luigi's Mansion 3 on the Switch, which I've never been a huge Luigi's Mansion fan, so I'll probably, you know, mostly because I haven't really played them. So I might pick that up just to give the series a whirl. Same with the new Animal Crossing. Animal Crossing is actually a series that I've wanted to get into for a while, but by the time I got into it, all the online features and stuff had already been shut down. I think the last one was New Leaf back like, you know, 4 or 5 years ago. So I'm definitely going to be picking up the new Animal Crossing and trying that out. Sort of related note, I'm really surprised that they're bringing Isabelle into Smash. That was a really kind of a surprise to me, and I was like, oh, well, that's really neat. So it's nice to see that Animal Crossing is getting another representative in Smash Brothers. Daemon X Machina, we saw a little bit more of that. I'm really stoked about that. Also really excited about Yoshi's Crafted World because I'm a huge Yoshi's Island fan, and I've had fun with every single one of those games, and I love that they're expanding on sort of the arts and crafts visuals design, like they did with Yoshi's Woolly World. So I'm really looking forward to that. Starlink, we saw a little bit more of that. I'm still pretty hype about that. I did have a bit of a fanboy moment when they showed Star Wolf at the end of that announcement. Let's see, what else did they really talk about that I got kind of stoked about? They didn't really reveal anything new with the Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu or Eevee that I was really would have made a difference to my purchasing decision. I've already got the game on pre-order, so you know they've already got my $1 there. It's really just at this point, you know, just give me the game already. You don't need to tell me anymore. I just want to see the game. Things that I wasn't that impressed with, the 3DS offerings. I mean, Kirby's Epic Yarn, it's a fun game, and I'm glad that it's coming to the 3DS. But at the same time, you know, I'm really kind of hoping that the 3DS goes out on a bigger bang than that. I know that you know, I'm not gonna kid myself and say that the 3DS has much longer left for this world. With the Switch out, the 3DS is definitely going to be going out the door. But you know, I was really kind of hoping to go out on a higher note than just, you know, a Wii port. You know, I'd really like to see, you know, maybe another, you know, big Square Enix RPG, another big, you know, Pokemon title or something, another Zelda coming out for the 3DS. You know, I really feel like it deserves to go out on a higher note than just, you know, a port of a Wii game. Diablo 3 for the Switch, probably not going to pick that up. I hated Diablo. I know Skyblaze is probably going to hate me when I say this, but I have hated Diablo 3 when it came out. You know, I've heard that with updates, it's almost a completely different game, but yeah, I'm still not that enthusiastic about it. Oh, another thing that I was really stoked to see was that they're bringing back a bunch of the Final Fantasy games to the Switch. We're getting Final Fantasy 7, 9, 10, 10-2, 12 Zodiac Edition, and the Pocket Edition of 15 on the Switch. So I was really most excited to see that Final Fantasy 7 and 9 are coming to the Switch. Now, my one worry is that they're going to completely botch up the porting like they did for the Steam ports. But, you know, we'll have to wait and see on that. I don't know. I mean, I guess, you know, I guess this, if they just ported the Steam versions, I guess it would look all right in handheld mode, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on the most recent Nintendo Direct. We're probably going to get one more in December, which I will probably be too distracted by actually playing Smash Brothers to actually watch. But, you know, we'll see what happens there. That's another question that we spent a fucking long time on. Goddamn. So, yeah, all right. So that's all the time that we have for Ask a Geek this week. Thank you, as always, for getting your questions in. We love reading them on the air. Send your questions to drgonzo@nerdofthethirdpower.com, and you just might get it read on the show. And so with that, we are going to jump right into the meat and potatoes of our show this week, and that is The Toys That Made Us, the 8-part documentary series released on Netflix. You know, talking about some major toy properties and how they came to be and how they impacted popular culture. And they talked about some really heavy hitters in this series. And, you know, one of the things I was really surprised by was how fascinating and well presented this was. Because one of the reasons why I was kind of turning my nose up at the series to begin with was, you know, I'm not really a huge fan of documentaries. I find a lot of them to be very dry and boring. And when, you know, I was talking with Mike Dodd after the show last week about the series, and he was talking about, it's about how all about these toy properties came to be and how they were developed. I was like, oh God, please tell me this isn't going to be about a bunch of like corporate backroom deals and shit, because I'll just be bored out of my skull. But no, it's actually a really entertaining little series, and I was actually, by the time I was finished watching it, I was really disappointed that it was that short. So I'm hoping we get more.
Yeah, more would be nice.
So, but those are my general thoughts. Kat, what about you?
I am not like you. I love documentaries. I'm very picky about what kind of documentaries I watch. And this had been on my radar for quite a while. Like, it was on my queue. I just had never gotten around to it. But I had heard really good things about this. So when we said, hey, let's watch this and talk about toys, and I was like, hell yes. And there was a lot of it that, I don't know why it never occurred to me, but a lot of the success and lack of success between toy lines is just due to other toy lines. You know, like I have some general knowledge of this is just a rip-off of that, or this was made in a response to that, but like when they talk about the thing to beat was Star Wars toys, yeah, every single episode of the documentary mentions Star Wars at some point. Like, it never occurred to me that, oh my gosh, I love these movies. These toys are as equally impactful as the films themselves. That kind of thing never occurred to me. And a lot of these documentaries take place in the, you know, like the 70s or earlier. So it's, you know, by the time we were kids, all of this stuff all these toys were mainstream. Everything had been relatively streamlined about them. So, you know, we didn't have a lot of the
rough patches.
Yeah. There wasn't quite as much drama around them. There wasn't as much controversy around some of them. So it was really interesting to get, you know, a portrait of toys that we grew up playing with, and that still get played with today, but seeing the historical aspect of it and realizing how much we had taken these for granted was very interesting to me.
Yeah, and they talked about some really heavy hitters in this series. I think off the top of my head, they talked, of course, they mentioned Star Wars, and of course you can't talk about Star Wars without also talking about Star Trek. They talked about G.I. Joe, Barbie, HeMan, Lego, Transformers, and Hello Kitty. And yeah, I remember them all. It was just such a fascinating thing to see, not just the thought process that went behind these, but also how they also had to kind of overcome, you know, some limitations or solve some problem that was presented by, you know, the competition, or even just to learn some of the little quirks. Like, you know, when they were talking about in the G.I. Joe episode about how, you know, there was a mix-up with the molds, and so G.I. Joe's thumbnail was on the inside of the thumb, and then when other people went and copied the doll, they copied it down so exactly that that thumbnail mistake was still there. So we thought it'd be fun to kind of not just talk about this series and the toys that it discussed, but also kind of talk about some of our favorite toys when we were growing up, and how, you know, they kind of formed us and shaped us. And so, you know, kind of linking into that, I really want to talk a bit about the Transformers episode, because Transformers was something that was really big to me when I was a small kid. Actually, it was probably one of my favorite. It was probably my favorite set of toys was my Transformers. And I remember, just for context, I was born in 1986. So by the time I came around, the first round of Transformers toys had already been through the market. And by the time I was about 4 or 5 years old, they'd started the Generation 2 line, which was basically they repackaged all the Generation 1 toys and re-syndicated the 80s Transformers cartoon with this weird trippy-ass CGI cube that did all the scene transitions. Try and find YouTube videos of some of these Generation 2 cartoon reprints. It's trippy as hell to watch. And it was you know, one of the most treasured toys that I have in my possession, and I still have it to this day, is the Optimus Prime toy that I got for I think it was my 7th birthday. And Optimus Prime has been, I'm pretty sure I've talked about this on the show before, but, you know, Optimus Prime was, you know, he was my hero coming up, and he kind of reminded me of my dad in a lot of ways, because he was this character who, you know, he was a fighter, but he also, you know, in addition to, you know, talk about, you know, the importance of like defending yourselves, is also, you know, the importance of defending others, and, you know, the strong man stands up for the weaker man. And, you know, he also talked about things like, you know, honor and standing up for others and integrity. And a lot of, you know, he was just an inspirational character to me, to the point where, you know, anything that kind of deviates from that, I find rather unsettling. I think it was when we did our review of the 3rd Michael Bay Transformers movie, which was Dark of the Moon, I think it was. And I talked about how at the end of that movie, when Optimus Prime kills Megatron, basically execution style, how that really shook me up, because here was this character who, you know, I had grown up admiring and had been, you know, a hero and an inspiration to me, you know, offing his enemy like, you know, a street hood, and how that shook me up. And I think that really speaks to how important and how formative to us our childhood play and playthings are. So, yeah, but what about you, Kat? Was there any particular episode that really stood out and spoke to you in this documentary series?
Now, I didn't get to watch all of them, and you'd think my favorite would have been Barbie, because I had a lot of Barbies growing up, or Hello Kitty, because I'm still a Kitty fan to this day, but it was actually HeMan, which kind of took me by surprise. Not in that I'm such a HeMan fan, because I'm really not. I was raised with Shira, like any good girl of the late 80s and early 90s, but what struck me about it was, and it shouldn't have, I should not have been surprised, but I was, at how sexist everybody behind that character was. You know, like, I have such respect for the message that they were trying to put into HeMan, because they discuss that, okay, you know, they wanted to create a toy for little boys, and they wanted this toy to convey power, because little boys wanted, you know, their own, what am I trying to say?
Agency?
Agency, yes, thank you. That is literally the word I was trying to think of. They want their own agency, and through that, you know, like, they want power over their own selves, because little boys are controlled by their parents, and everybody hates being controlled by their parents. So they had this theme of power going throughout it. So they created the manliest character they could and called him HeMan, which, I'm sorry, but HeMan is a really dumb name. It always has been. It always will be. It's really dumb. But it, you know, it was the time. It was a product of its time. And then eventually the toy company realized that there was a lot of girls who were buying these toys and playing with them. So this is when Shira spinoff came out. And, you know, a bunch of little girls like me were watching Shira and wanting to be Shira. And at some point, you know, the HeMan toys took a downturn, because all toys take, you know, they have their ups and downs. And this was at a point where the company was putting out just tons and tons of extra toys and accessories for it that were just completely unrelated. They were, you know, putting out a lot of just garbage toys to sell to kids and just slapping the He-Man logo on it. And then they turned around and said, well, He-Man's not popular anymore because of girls. Because girls enjoying Shira means that boys don't want to play with He-Man anymore because they, you know, they see a girl playing with something that is sort of like theirs, and now it's not cool anymore.
And you know, there's something that didn't really touch on in the documentary about the downturn of Shira coinciding with the downturn of He-Man. And that was that the reason why Shira didn't take off to the same level with girls as He-Man did for boys was because a huge part of that was because, you know, the girls who wanted their own version of He-Man were just watching He-Man.
Right. And Shira was definitely catered towards girls, and I definitely watched it way more than He-Man, but it was limited. There was a lot less of it. There was a lot less lore. There was a lot less content. You know, He-Man had comics and tons more toys, and it was about fighting and action, and it was really cool. And Shira was way more geared towards girls' stereotypes, and that's not necessarily what girls actually wanted. It, you know, but it, you know, girls enjoyed it too. But the guys who created He-Man would literally go up to the woman who created Shira and blame her for killing the He-Man franchise. And to me, that absolutely blew my mind. And on the other hand, it surprised me, but it shouldn't have.
Well, there's also something that has to be pointed out, and that's that Shira was a large part of the contributing team for Shira was actually from the Barbie side of the house, which I don't know. This made it just me looking kind of at this sideways, but it seemed like the way Shira was treated in the 80s was kind of self-defeating, because here you have a character that you're introducing as a figure of female empowerment to give the same, you know, basically a He-Man type character for girls, and yet the toy line was marketed almost like Barbie with a sword, which to me seems kind of self-defeating on that premise, that Mattel kind of really was kind of competing with itself in that manner. Does that make any sense? No,
it does make sense, and I can't talk too much onto it because I literally never had a single Shira toy at all. I don't think my family had any He-Man or Shira toys.
Okay.
So, but it just struck me so much throughout that one in particular, but other of the other episodes of the documentary about the reasons why they thought something failed, because the documentary takes a rather objective approach, but you do get to hear people's thoughts and opinions about stuff, and so different people in the same documentary might blame the downturn of a toy line on different things, and but it was really interesting that they made that one so personal for the creator of Shira, and then specifically called out like an entire gender for the downturn of He-Man. Not, you know, that the fact that they weren't making new cartoons or that, you know, the toys weren't that good. They specifically blamed all girls. Like, that was just mind-blowing to me. But they also were very protective, as everybody in these documentaries are very protective of what they created. But these guys basically just hated any suggestion that anybody else made that wasn't their own. And they just irked me so much.
And it wasn't just people coming from outside the group. They also thought amongst themselves.
Yeah, they you know, took a suggestion from their own boss and said that was the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And I'm like, well, it worked, so what are you still complaining about?
So, all right. So, I guess now the next question I have is, what was a toy that was really important to you in your formative years that, you know, that really impacted your development?
Gosh, I don't know. Because I had lots of different kinds of toys. I had Barbies and Polly Pockets and stuff.
I'm sorry. Can I just say that the image that is now in my head of you playing with Polly Pockets is just breaking my brain, because I know, based on what I know of you, I cannot conceive of a world where you played with Polly Pockets.
I did. I actually was a girl child, and but to me, my favorite toys, and this should come as no surprise, my favorite toys were the Jurassic Park toys. Because it was the one set of toys that I had that my brother would play with me. And I have never really gotten along with my brother as we've gotten older, but when we were younger, this was the thing that brought us together. And we had some neighbors who also had Jurassic Park toys, and we turned our entire backyard into a nature preserve, and we'd run the hose to create a river, and we'd have like, oh, the raptors nest over here and the T-Rex is over here. And it was like a collaborative effort for me and my brother and my friends. We just would spend all day playing with these toys. And the other toys that I had, you know, I didn't do a lot of playing with other people. I just played by myself a lot. But these were the toys that, you know, for me, established a connection with other people the most.
Okay. And, you know, another set of toys that, you know, we kind of have to really talk about, episode that we really have to talk about, and that's the Lego episode, because, you know, I think it's fair to say, certainly I'm a huge Lego fan. I'm really disappointed Brian's not here to talk about this, because he's a big Lego nut. You know, but, you know, Lego is something that has been so important to so many people, and it was really fascinating to watch the episode they did on Lego and see how close to the brink that the brand has come on multiple occasions. And the thing is like, you know, to the casual observer, you know, you wouldn't have even known it. And it was really fascinating to learn about, you know, the history of the company and how this, you know, they developed this system that everything in the toy line falls under and adheres to. And also it was really kind of shocking to see how something that is so big and successful as Lego can actually make its own missteps and come close to you know, disappearing forever. They talk about how, you know, when Bionicle saved the brand, you know, I remember Bionicle being a huge thing way back in the early 2000s, but I never even had any hint growing up that, you know, the idea of Lego failing and going out of business was just inconceivable to me. And it's even more so now that it's this huge, you know, multimedia brand. You know, now you've got Lego movies, Lego TV series, Lego video games, you know, Lego books. But to see how this toy line grew from basically one little shop in I think it was Denmark, to the mega brand that it was now, and also, you know, come back from the brink multiple times, was just extremely fascinating.
Lego is definitely an interesting one. It's like it's so synonymous. The brand is so synonymous with what it is that there is no other term for like interlocking brick toy. Everything is just Legos. It's either Legos or off-brand Legos, but it is never interlocking brick toy. Nobody says that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is number one in its category of toy. There are many copies, and none of them are as good. But it was different for me growing up with Legos because I was a girl, and, you know, my brother had just buckets of Legos, and I wanted Legos too. And my mom went out and bought me Legos, and those Legos were, ooh, guess what color the Legos were?
The pink and purple, the Lego, I think it was Belleville line was the girls' line in the 90s.
The pink and purple buckets. That's what I got to play with. And you couldn't, like, I never mixed them with my brother's Legos because it just seemed wrong. I didn't want to take my brother's toys. and there was only so much you could do, and I had considerably less than my brother. But Legos, for the longest time, was his main focus, so he just got tons and tons of them, and I got, 2 buckets that I, played with when I wanted. But, it wasn't like what you have now. We had it to some extent, but when you go to the store and you look at Legos now, it's never just like, here's a bucket of Legos. It's here, which model of the Enterprise do you want to build? Or which, it's all very specific. It's all branded and everything. And back in the early 2000s, when Bionicle was super hot, I actually worked at the Lego store at the mall. And, there was nothing generic there. There was, almost nothing generic. It was all like, here's a Harry Potter castle for you to build. Everything was associated with some other franchise. And I think that's both Lego's strength and weakness to me. Is that, okay, you have these really strong brands associated with it. It would make somebody who would not normally buy Legos want to go buy Legos. But on the other hand, that branding and franchising comes at a cost. And Legos are prohibitively expensive.
They really are. To me, I grew up with a lot of Legos, and I love them, of course, growing up. But the memories that I actually have most strongly associated with them came from when I was in my late teens, getting close to adulthood. And that was about say like 2005 or so, when my mom and my now ex-stepfather were dating, and my now ex-stepfather, who we'll just call the fat bastard here on out for simplicity, don't ask why, brought with him his son from his previous marriage, who, my now little brother Wilson. And, growing up, I had gotten used to being the only guy in the house, because the only sibling that I had was my little sister, who it's only now that we're adults that we're actually starting to get close and really find things in common. Because, I was the boy's boy and my sister was the girly girl, and ne'er the twain would meet, as kids, we were pretty much emblematic of the stereotypes that, would have had that sharp divide between, the HeMan and the Shira toys. But, so now along comes, Wilson, who he was, I want to say like 6 years old when he came into the family. And, I now had this little brother that I didn't know how to, I didn't know how to be a big brother to a little brother. I didn't know anything how to do that. But, he got into, I still had my Legos from when I was a kid, and he got into them, and he would playing with them. And, the Legos served as, not to make a really cheesy pun, kind of built a bond between us, because we were able to bond over playing Legos and, playing around with the Star Wars sets and, building all kinds of crazy stuff. And so it really kind of formed a bridge between the two of us. And, now the two of us, we're thick as thieves, and from there, of course, we branched out into, I dug out my old video games for him to play with, and, we bonded over that. But, that's really the strongest memory that I have that's associated with Lego, is not playing with them by myself, but, using them to help build a relationship between myself and, my little brother, who, even after the whole drama with my, again, now ex-stepdad, is still, I consider, my brother and part of the family, and I couldn't imagine my life without him. And a large part of that is, again, comes from just the two of us just playing Legos together. I don't know, that probably sounded really cheesy and sappy, but there it is.
Yeah, no more so than mine.
So, what was another toy that was really impactful to you, or another episode of the series that really spoke out to you?
Gosh, one of the episodes that I'm surprised and I'm not surprised at was Hello Kitty. So finally, here's me talking about the thing you'd think I would have brought up first. And it surprises me that Hello Kitty was included in this, because Hello Kitty is not exclusively a toy. It didn't start as a toy. Hello Kitty, if you watch the episode, started as a coin purse line. It was basically a company wanted something cute to slap onto accessories. And I've never thought in at any point in my life, I've never thought of Hello Kitty as a toy. Or, you know, like, I know that there are toys of Hello Kitty, but I've always associated Hello Kitty with, you know, like stationery, bags, shirts, like clothing or accessories. And I've never really thought, even though I have had plushes of Hello Kitty, I've never thought of Hello Kitty as a toy line.
You almost think of Hello Kitty kind of like Mickey Mouse, not so much as a toy, or even from one specific, you know, area of culture, but as just kind of a mascot that gets slapped onto 1,000 different things.
I mean, that's essentially what Hello Kitty was. Hello Kitty was like basically like a mascot. Like, Hello Kitty was made as a marketing tool, less so than as a character. So for her to be included in this, I thought at first was a little odd, but Hello Kitty is obviously one of the most impactful characters in the world. That's not even an exaggeration. She's worth billions of dollars and has TV shows and has done. So if you ever look up some of the crossover marketing that Hello Kitty has done, Hello Kitty has crossed over with Kiss. And to me, it's just like...
I'm sorry, once more in my good ear?
They did a marketing crossover with Hello Kitty and the band Kiss. So I'm like, I don't think of her as a toy line at all. I don't associate Hello Kitty with toys. I associate Hello Kitty with clothes and accessories and toys, but also cartoons and manga and just about everything. So it was a little surprising that she was on there, but she has been very impactful. Everybody loves Kitty. And not just Kitty, but the whole Sanrio line.
Well, I mean, they pretty much wrote the book on kawaii.
Yeah, I mean, they might have pushed that Hello Kitty invented kawaii culture, and that could be very true to some extent. Because especially in Japan specifically, like, guys are okay with things being cute. It's not totally forbidden, you know. There's a certain amount of acceptance that I can like something that's kawaii, and that's okay.
Although sometimes it does get a little bit weird, like this whole chitan thing that I'm seeing popping up. But you and you can explain that to me off air, because it's just weird as hell.
I might be able to explain that to you. I might not.
But anyway, but yeah, it's so interesting to see how some of these toys became cultural phenomenon. And with that, we kind of have to address the elephant in the room, and that's the Star Wars episode, because as Kat has already pointed out, that was pretty much the sun around which all the other properties that were talked about in this series orbited. Everything was compared to Star Wars and the marketing giant that was. So that's, you know, what's really interesting about that one to me is how, I mean, it almost, how it came out of nowhere. The story of the Star Wars toys, in many ways, it echoes the story of the Star Wars movies, and that here's this little thing that nobody thought was going to be successful, that nobody thought was going to make money, that they let the rights go away for nothing, and then it just came out of complete left field and just surprised everybody with how big and impactful to popular culture it was, to the point where when they talked about this in the episode, when they were developing the first Star Wars action figures, they knew that they weren't going to be able to get them out in time for the Christmas season. So they put out literally just this empty box with slots for you to put the figures into. And you got a card with it that you could mail in to get a set of the first figures when they came out, I think like later, like that April or something.
Yeah, I mean, they took a lot of risks with Star Wars, and those risks generally all paid off. It's so overwhelming to think about when you watch the series. You know, like we said, everybody had to compete against Star Wars in some facet or another. Not just because Star Wars was immensely popular, but because they kept making more Star Wars. And it was such a huge jump, you know, for something like G.I. Joe that, you know, was a toy line first, and then in order to keep kids engaged, they made cartoons. So like HeMan and GI Joe and stuff like that. Whereas Star Wars was a family film. Everybody watched it. Everybody loved it. And the toy lines were mostly geared towards kids, but they didn't necessarily have to be, and that's how a lot of things became collector's items. But again, they kept making them, you know? It was like, hey, we're gonna put this movie out no matter what. So they didn't have to create additional content to, you know, generate interest in a toy. They just were gonna keep making films and then had to scramble to make more toys.
Yeah. And one of the things that I thought was really neat that they touched upon in a few episodes, most especially the Star Wars, the Star Trek, and the Lego episodes, is, and they also touched a bit in the He-Man episode, is how, you know, these toy lines have carried forward to new generations, to, you know, the children of the people who grew up with these properties. And that sort of brings us to the next area of discussion I kind of want to bring up on this. And that's, I want to kind of take a look at why, you know, toys are so, I guess, important to us in pop culture, because, you know, one of the things that, you know, is certainly in our generation, I'd say it really is where it really got its start. You know, before us, you know, there was this whole thing, you know, okay, you know, when I was a child, I thought like a child, played like a child. Yeah. Now that I'm a man, I put away childish things, you know, where, you know, we grew up, we put our toys away, we sold them, we threw them out or whatever. But, you know, we still now as adults in our generation, you know, a lot of us are still basically buying toys. You know, even, you know, for myself, I've got a whole bunch of, you know, figures and statues up on my shelf that, you know, I have on display and still, you know, and collect. You know, I have the entire Funko My Little Pony vinyl line. I've got a whole bunch of, you know, superheroes up on my shelf. You know, a whole bunch of video game characters. I still have my Optimus Prime toys, and I still buy the odd Lego set. And it's no small thing to say that a huge portion of fandom and our attachment to fandom comes from toys. And do you think that maybe the reason why we're so passionate about these is that because they're something tangible that we can have, so that we can actually touch, you know, something that we are passionate about and actually touch a piece of our fandom? Like, you know, it's, you know, like we can all say that we love Star Wars, we can all say that we love Star Trek, but to have, say, like, you know, a Luke Skywalker figure or a Princess Leia figure, that gives us some kind of tangible connection to that mythology. Do you think, am I sounding crazy, or am I making any kind of sense here?
No, you're making the exact point I would have made had you not already said it, that it is something, you know, like we love, you know, Star Wars, and those are movies, and we can't be a part of those, but we can hold a piece of them in the form of the Millennium Falcon Lego set, or something like that. You know, it's just getting a little more immersive than we ever could in real life. But also, it's a point of pride for us as fans to have something and to prove that we're fans, because let's face it, fandoms are all about, you know, there's a lot of toxicity in fandoms about proving that you're the #1 fan, that you're a better fan than other people. And while not everybody is that toxic about it, there is a certain element of, I want to prove my fandom. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to have merchandise, to walk around in your Star Wars shirt, or to have, you know, and your a lightsaber up on the mantle of your home. You know, it tells people what you're interested in and shows your level of commitment and dedication to that fandom. And other people can gauge how interested you would be in a conversation if you're wearing a Star Wars shirt or something like that.
So you're also saying that in a very real way, these toys can help to bring people together, because, you know, you might be, you know, like, I mean, the whole, you know, and this actually, to bring in a personal anecdote, you know, this is kind of contributory to how you and I met. I've told this story on the show a couple times about how you and I met. We met at Anne Arundel Community College on my second day there, and I was you know, just by myself, didn't know anybody, and I, you know, didn't have anybody to talk to. And I saw you over a few tables over, and you had on you were wearing this hat that had a whole bunch of character pins on it. And I remember very distinctly, one of them was this little chibi Sailor Moon pin. And I was like, well, you know, that's if nothing else, that's a point of reference that I can use as an icebreaker. So I just sat down and said hello, and now here we are. The rest is history.
Yeah, I've never had so many complete strangers come up and talk to me as when I'm wearing a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles t-shirt. There is literally no other shirt I can wear that will garner attention than Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And immediately I know you're from the same generation as me, you know, like, and you can immediately go, who's your favorite turtle? And then get into an argument with somebody. It's great. So, like, you know, having some sort of tangible proof of our fandom is such a great icebreaker for people. It's a great way of showing off a little bit, but, you know, demonstrating your level of interest in something. But, like, toys specifically, I think are a bit different, because I think they just help us recapture the spark, you know, not just
that sense of wonder that we had as children watching these things.
There was just something about a new toy when you were a kid. And, you know, like our generation, we had like Macy's magazines and Toys R Us catalogs and...
let me tell you, it was Christmas came early in my house when the Sears catalog came in for me and my sister, because we would fight over who would get to flip through the toy section. It finally got to the point where my mom actually, when the catalog came in, she'd tear out all the toy pages and hand them to us and take the rest of the catalog somewhere else, because she knew if she didn't, she'd never see it again.
I know. And you know, like, my parents would hand us the catalog and go, okay, pick out what you want for Christmas. Don't, you know, like, pick out a couple things. You might get them. Maybe if you're good, Santa will bring you one of these things. And I would go through with a fucking highlighter, highlighting or circling all the things that I just absolutely had to have. And there was just so much hope we pinned on our love of toys. We wanted so much. And when I think about it, God, I had a lot of toys as a kid. My brother and I had a ton of toys, and I don't know how we afforded it, because one of the great things that comes out of that documentary that you don't perceive as a kid, but now that you're an adult, how did our parents afford this? Well, with so much competition out, our parents had to make choices. And that's part of why Star Wars was the thing to beat, because parents are going to have to, parents had to choose between this toy or that toy. What can they afford to give their kid? And whatever their kid was into the most, or whatever was the most fun to play with, is what they were going to choose for their kid.
And as a result, the toy companies had to bring their A game. And I think that's really best exemplified in the Star Trek episode, where when they first started making Star Trek toys, they were just slapping the Star Trek name on anything that would stand still long enough.
Yeah, G.I. Joe. They had to completely revamp it several times so that they could, like, tack on more accessories, so that, you know, G.I. Joe could not just, you know, be in a karate chop hand position, that G.I. Joe had to be able to hold stuff. Barbie had to be able to hold stuff, so that they, you know, like, the companies could tack on more accessories for you to buy, which would give parents more incentive. If they know you're going to get more use out of one toy than in the other, they're going to buy that toy that you're going to use the most. So it created some really heavy competition, and that competition created better toys. We win! But it kind of blows my mind looking back. My parents still have, you know, like, bins full of my brothers and I's toys from when we were kids. And I gotta wonder, like, you know, should we look at selling those, because some of them might be worth something now? Or do I have such an emotional connection to some of these toys that I couldn't possibly give them up, even though I literally do nothing with them?
And I guess that brings us to the next question I have is, did you see any toys that you remembered from when you were a kid on any of these documentaries? And I'm going to open this up by saying I actually knew a kid who had that giant fuck off G.I. Joe aircraft carrier.
No, the 7-foot-long aircraft carrier based on the Nimitz.
Yep, he had that aircraft carrier, and I remember when he got it, he was like, "Oh, like here's the." And let me provide some context. This kid was, you know, he didn't come from a really well-to-do family. Like he had GI Joes, but they were all kind of ones that were bought like that you were handing it down from like people who were getting rid of them, or he bought them when they were like, his parents bought them from when they were in like the discount bin or something. So he had a lot of like the older characters. Let me tell you, when he got the aircraft carrier for Christmas, he was over the freaking moon. Like it was like Santa Claus had visited him personally. Because and remember, this is still like several years after, this is the early 90s, so this is when GI Joe wasn't the huge monolith that it had been in the 80s. Like it was still around, but it was nowhere near as big. But when he got that aircraft carrier, oh my god, he was just like he was king of the castle, and he still has it to this day. And I actually got in touch with him after seeing the G.I. Joe episode. I reached out to him and to find out if he still had that carrier. And yeah, he still has it, and he's gotten it appraised. He could sell that sucker for about $25,000.
Holy shit! Do it, dude! Oh my god!
So,
oh my gosh!
What about you? Did you see anything that you recognized watching these?
It took a while for me to find something I recognized, but it was actually the Star Trek episode, because my dad was a big Trekkie, and our whole family watched Star Trek every single week, and my brother had tons of the Next Generation toys, and after we moved, I snuck out my two favorites. I don't know why, but it was Worf and Guinan. They were like my favorite characters, so I snuck them, one of the Worfs, and I think we maybe had one or two Guinans, but I snuck them and tucked them away and hid them, and I might have also stolen a Riker. I'm not sure at this point, because I don't know where they're in a box somewhere in my closet, but
so you still have them?
Oh yeah, so we've never gotten rid of our toys. My parents have threatened to just throw them away, but I think at this point, at least, I mean, stuffed animals aside, a lot of the toys that we had were, my brother had a ton of the Aliens toys, which I really hope they do an episode on, because they got some really crazy shit in those toys line.
Oh man, yeah.
My brother had Aliens, we had a lot of Star Trek, and we had a lot of Jurassic Park. So we had these franchise toys that came from movies, and I heard a couple years back that the Aliens toys were going for a lot nowadays. So I've kind of like told my parents, hang on to some of these, because these might be worth some money, which is ridiculous when you think about these were things that we bashed into the ground at in our backyard.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, a lot of it was not they had the Barbie episode and they had the Hello Kitty episode, but until they do a Polly Pocket episode, I didn't quite recognize a whole lot of stuff, especially in the Barbie episode, because there have been so many Barbie, and they were really digging into the history of Barbie. And yeah, that was an interesting episode.
All right. Well, you mentioned some toy lines that you didn't see in this series as you'd like to see. So I guess that'll be the final point of discussion, is if they do more, and God, I hope they do. What are some toy lines that you would like to see covered by the toy in another season of the Toys That Made Us?
They absolutely must do American Girl. I'm honestly surprised that this didn't get done, already. But again, mostly they've done toys that were mostly geared towards boys or collectors. And maybe it's because American Girl doesn't have that long of a history by comparison. But American Girl dolls don't have that long history. Aren't they like 50 years old? I don't know. Now fuck, we're gonna have to Google it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look this up, because I don't remember American Girl dolls being a spring chicken. I'll look it up. You keep going. No, I'm looking it up now. I have to. No, released in 1986. So okay, I was all right.
Yeah, the American Girl dolls were a status symbol for young girls because they were, much like Legos are now, prohibitively expensive. And there were so very, very many of them. And they were interesting because they were meant to teach us something. They, you know, if you don't know anything about American Girl dolls, and I'm assuming that if you don't, you're a guy, because every girl
I take umbrage with that. I am quite familiar with American Girl dolls because my sister had several growing up.
I'm just saying, if you don't know what American Girl is, you're probably a guy. That's not to say guys don't know what it is, but American Girl dolls had, you could customize them to look like yourself, but they were most popular for having, you know, there would be a character who would be set in a certain time period, and there would be a whole line of accessories that were period clothes. And then you'd have another girl who was set, you know, like in a time period like 20 years later. And then they'd have another set of period clothes. And on and on and on up into like the 60s or something, you know, at the time that I stopped being a kid and getting the magazines that you'd get. They were so interesting to me as a kid because I wanted all of these dolls. I wanted all of this clothes. I loved the history. You could buy books to learn more about the characters. Like, it was very in-depth. And, you know, being a kid, I didn't have any knowledge of, is this historically accurate or not? But it all sure felt like, oh my gosh, there's this American Girl doll and she's got this really cute bonnet and, you know, all this really neat stuff. And I would always sit there and decide, you know, I'd get the magazine in the mail and narrow down, oh, well, if I had to get one, this is the one I would get, and this is the clothes I would get, and I never got one. My mom eventually caved and got me an American Girl that was, you know, like, that was supposed to be, looked like me. It's not what I wanted at all, but it's what I got, and I was fucking grateful as anything for it. But my cousins, they had every American Girl doll, like every accessory for them, and I was so jealous. It was such a status symbol, or I perceived it as a status symbol anyway, to have an American Girl doll. To have all of the, because it was, again, it was really expensive. The dolls were expensive, all the accessories added up, and I had no concept of money when I was a kid. I was like, wow, that looks like that's a lot of money. Well, my family can't afford that, so I'm never going to get one of these. And I didn't even get one until I was a little bit older and less into American Girl. And I think a part of it was because kids are really hard on their toys. And if you're going to spend that much money on a toy, you want your kid to be responsible. So you got to wait a little while before you give them something kind of expensive.
Or it's got to be made Tonka tough.
Yeah, or it's got to be made Tonka tough. So I didn't get one until I was a little bit older and a lot less interested in American Girl. But it's such an, you know, it's a big, it's just different, you know, like, it's a big franchise. It's never been the most successful, but it did, you know, stuff that other toys at the time just haven't done, because every doll of the main line has a story, and it's historical based. You're learning as you're playing with these toys, and the period clothes, I think, are part of what made me so interested in period costumes and watching period pieces in, you know, where I watch a lot of shows that I call costume porn, where I'm watching it because the costumes are really cool. And I feel like that's a part of it, was just, you know, flipping through a magazine every couple of months or however often they came out and looking at all these clothes. And you could buy the clothes too, if I'm not mistaken, which of course was never going to be a thing for me. But it was just, you know, you could dress like your doll, and that's so cool. But again, my family could never really afford it. We afforded tons of other toys. That
was just the one that didn't make it past the post.
Yeah, because it was a lot of money for one doll. But so I really hope they do an American girl episode, because I know adult women who are in their 20s and, you know, like early 30s who still love their American Girl dolls. You know, I had a friend who actually had a really horrible house fire. And one of the things she was able to recover from the house fire was a very crispy American Girl doll. And she sent it off to the American Girl Hospital and got it back clean as a whistle. And I'm like, I can't believe that that's a thing. Like, I would have given up. But she really loves it.
Okay. Well, let's see. A couple of franchises I think would be really appropriate to cover for the toys that made us. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is the first one that leaps to mind, because as huge as G.I. Joe was in the 80s, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was in the 90s. I mean, those toys were absolutely everywhere, and you saw some really crazy stuff come out of them. Another thing that I think would be really fascinating to see is Batman toys, because again, that's a property that's been around for a long time, has changed a lot of hands, and has seen some really crazy stuff. Honestly, I think a look at the DC and Marvel toys and action figures in general would be a really neat episode, particularly the Mego line, which they kind of touched on in the Star Trek episode. I think those would be really cool to talk about. Let's see, what else was a really big toy franchise when I was coming up? I'm trying to think. This is gonna sound really stupid, but this was a toy line that I was really attached to when I was a kid, and I would really love to see talked about. And again, this is gonna sound really stupid, and I'm probably gonna get some people laughing at me about this, but I'd really love to see them do an episode on Thomas the Tank Engine. Because when I was a real little kid, I was all about Thomas the Tank Engine. When I was like 5 or 6 years old, a company named Ertl, I don't know if they're still around, but they made these die-cast metal Thomas the Tank Engine train toys and sets. And, you know, every week my mother would take me to Beep Beep, which is a local toy shop in Annapolis. It's still there. That shop is still there in the Festival at Riva in Annapolis. It's now called Franklin Toys, though. But if you ever go in there and you see a woman named Meg running the place, tell her Billy Smith says hello, because that was the same woman that ran the store when I was a little kid. And she would always set aside the newest Thomas toy for me every week, and my mom would take me in and buy it for my collection. And she still has those Thomas the Tank Engine toys in this dinosaur backpack from when I was like 7 years old. She said she's never going to throw those away. But I still have all those Thomas the Tank Engine toys. And I think it'd be really neat for them to do an episode on that. Because a lot of the toys that they talked about was stuff for, I want to say kind of older kids, maybe like 7, 8 years old. They didn't really talk about anything really for, like, you know, the 6 and under crowd. And I think Thomas the Tank Engine would be a really good candidate for that. Let's see. And, you know, this might be a little bit outside of the wheelhouse, but I think a talk about Pokemon toys would be really cool, because like I said, that was another thing that was kind of like the second Star Wars, was something that nobody could have predicted would become the cultural force that it was. So I think that'd be a really good candidate for an episode of the toys that made us. So,
you know what, Matchbox cars.
Ooh, yes, Matchbox cars and Hot Wheels.
Yeah, like, those have such a long history. I can't believe that wasn't in there.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Because yeah. Wow. Rare indeed was the child who didn't have at least one Matchbox or Hot Wheels car.
No kidding.
So I still have the Hot Wheels Back to the Future DeLorean that I bought at Universal Studios when I was like 13 years old.
Oh my God.
All right. So another big thing I think would be cool. Power Rangers. I think that'd make a really good episode. Ghostbusters. Kind of on the fence on that one, because while yeah, those toys were really big in the 80s, they kind of fell off the wagon, and we didn't really see a whole bunch of them until, I mean, I guess you had the Extreme Ghostbusters in the mid 90s, but then after that it kind of fell asleep until the 2016 movie. So I don't know, maybe. But now that's the point where we turn it over to you, our listeners. What are some toys that really were impactful to your development that you really loved as kids growing up, and that, you know, played a huge part in your development? And you know, the series we're talking about is, again, The Toys That Made Us. It's 8 parts long. It's on Netflix now. definitely check it out. It is a very fascinating, very fun series. And if you're like me and Kat, you know, children at heart, you know, love to reminisce about the good young times, you know, might even put a tear in your eye. I know it had me kind of misty-eyed at a few points. So yeah, but that's all the time that we have for Nerd to the Third Power this week. Thank you as always for tuning in. We will see you next week. As always, I'm Dr. Gonzo.
I'm the Cat.
We will see you next week. Taka, play us out.